Welcome to Fleet Auto News Podcast. I'm Caroline Falls, and today I'm speaking with two people, Dan Antonello, General Manager Australia and New Zealand at HEMA Technologies, and Robert Gallagher, Managing Director for HEMA Maps. These two location data companies have a collaboration where HEMA's regional Australia maps are embedded into HEMA Tech's worldwide mapping technology. We'll talk about that and what it means particularly for remote fleet operators. Welcome Dan and welcome Robert.
Hi Caroline, thanks for having us.
Hi Caroline, how are you going?
First I'll ask Dan to tell us more about what HEMA do and what HEMA means to HEMA, and tell us about the latest developments in your business relationship and what it means for servicing fleets in Australia.
Certainly. So HEMA Technologies, Caroline, is the world's largest location platform and services company. We've been driving the roads in Australia for over 20 years now, collecting all the attribution on the Australian road network. We've actually been doing it globally for 35 years. A lot of the products that come out of the content that we collect go into navigation systems, so turn by turn, instructions for vehicles, but you also see, for your audience in particular, a lot of information going into the fleet telematics, so really helping to track the trucks, provide those telematics services regarding what's happening on the road versus what's happening in the driver cabin, and also other real dynamic services such as real-time traffic conditions. So we've been, building this data lake for quite some time now. And however, we've been partnering with HEMA Maps since 2008, really to help us extend, our product into areas that we typically don't explore. So, for example, HEMA, we focus primarily on the day-to-day public road network where commuters are travelling and trucks are driving, whereas HEMA spend most of their time more off the track. So when you're going from, a sealed bitumen surface road to an unsealed road, and that could be, a fire trail, that could be, heading towards a camping site. So what we're doing with this partnership is bringing these two worlds together.
And Robert, how long has HEMA been doing what it's doing, and what does HEMA mean to you?
Thanks, Karen. So HEMA's been doing what it's been doing for 30 years. It was started actually laminating marine charts back in the day, and it moved 21 years ago. We had our first map patrol expedition, which was really around identifying in remote regional Australia there was a lack of good quality data to get people in and out safely. So we sent our first fleet out back then, and have been doing it ever since. And the real purpose of that field work that we do is to make sure that we're collecting enough data out there to get people out into the regions and back home safely. The big change of focus for our organisation about 3 or 4 years ago was working with HEMA. We were able to say, we're not going to tackle the urban environment. That's covered by HEMA, so we'll take their information. We'll really focus and double down on making sure our efforts are centred around the remote roads, the remote tracks, all that sort of information to allow it to be scaled. So I think in that process, we've been able to increase our data activity out in the region by about 10 times through that period. So, and again, it's just the nature of that part of Australia is it's so remote and so vast. I think we worked it out, it's about 1.5% of the population lives on 95% of the landmass. So it's a significant area, which doesn't have significant traffic through it.
Okay, so, Dan, I'll just turn back to you. Obviously, you guys have been working together for a long time, so you must have already worked out, obviously, how to harmonise your data. But that's one of the big challenges of the time at the moment, isn't it? I mean, there's so much data, but it's only useful if you can sort of harmonise it. So maybe talk about that.
Yeah, most certainly. So HEMA really for us is really forged that reputation as, I would say, one of the best map makers in the world for four-wheel driving, right? And, providing us access to the great outdoors, whilst we really focus on that, that other area, which is, I guess, more the urban, where let's say 90 to 95% of Australian population is. But the critical part of this is, having these two data sets, speak the same language. So we talk about harmonising data, is that we're collecting in a way where they can communicate with each other. So when you go right back to 2008, when this partnership first started, here how we've done it, we have our own proprietary formats that we use, and then HEMA was able to adopt those formats, so that when we received them, the data sets from HEMA, it was done in a way which was completely compatible with the HERE road network. And when I talk about completely compatible, a great example is if you have a piece of road and there's sort of the road veers off now into the track, there's what we call a node. A node's kind of like an intersection, which represents a piece of road segment joining another piece of road segment, but because they're done in the same language, Caroline, it means that the navigation experience seamlessly moves, through these road segments, through the node into the other one. So the actual system itself that's reading the data really has no trouble identifying, the path forward.
I think just to add to that, we've from a HEMA side, we've been working the last couple of years around matching up the link IDs, so the ability to make sure that the road network is actually connected at a database level. So, because we had the same problem when we were doing our updates, is new roads would appear, and so the ability to find that connection point was challenged. So we've made sure that as we go through this process, we're harmonising that data. So as we're collecting data in from here and sending it back the other way, that there is a connection.
Rob, I take your point that only, I think you said 1.5% of people live on 95% of Australia's land. But Australia's distinctive in that we have mining and agricultural operations. So I was just curious about what businesses are operating in remote and regional areas that are using your data. And I was just wondering if mining and agricultural groups get you to do private maps of their own sites.
Yeah, so that's certainly an area that we have a lot of people talk to us about at the moment. I think traditionally HEMA was a very consumer-oriented business, so we were selling to the end consumer, really focused on that four-wheel drive segment. The reality is we've got a number of pastoralists, mining businesses, transportation businesses that are using our data and our systems in their workforces, but they've historically been using a consumer application. So what we've been doing is working with those different segments to understand their business needs, and then adapting our software and solutions to actually service some of the requirements. So the fact that we've got field teams out there who can do the mapping and that data collection, or even empower some of those businesses to do it themselves but feed it back into our data network, is what we're working on. So it's not just we need to go and do that QA process ourselves. We're actually working with them to just get better data into the system, and that allows us to represent better information on the map, which can then plug into the road network over time, or if it's private, stay private.
Yeah. I think I'll add to that. I think that's where the real synergies between us come together. So when we are collecting geometry or attribution in remote areas, there's one thing to collect it. There's another thing is to host it and process that, and then actually have it connected into a bigger data set. And I think that's where the real benefit, the real value of the HERE platform comes into play, because the HERE platform really enables that connection into the location services. So when I talk about location services, I mean the routing services, the map visualization services, the search services, actually those tools that actually make the data come to life. So now that we've collected this data, whether it be in a mining site or far remote area, we need to be able to surface it so that you can provide, routing instructions, you can do a search of that area, or you can provide turn-by-turn instructions. And so with HEMA's capability to reach the four corners of Australia, and then his capability to process that and then connect it with the, let's say, the greater data set, that creates the end-to-end experience.
We'll be back after a short break for a word from our sponsor, Sofico Services.
Sofico is a world-leading provider of enterprise software for the automotive leasing, finance, and mobility industry. For more than 30 years, international leasing companies and OEMs count on Sofico's expertise and technology to help them transform innovative product concepts into streamlined business processes and engaging customer experiences. With more than 370 experts, 8 offices on 4 continents, and an annual growth averaging 15%, Sofico is perfectly positioned to help its customers succeed in a rapidly changing market where electrification, shared fleets, and multimodal mobility challenge us and our customers to play a pioneering role. Continuous investment in people, innovation, and leading-edge technology is the basis for continued growth and success.
Also, Rob, and, still along the same lines, you were mentioning that HEMA, has been a consumer focused in the past. And so I can't help but sort of talk about this explosion in domestic travel in Australia the last couple of years when international borders closed for COVID. Did that leisure market explode for your products? And I imagine it did. And does growth there deliver anything of benefit for business customers? And again, I imagine like the energy companies rely on your maps too.
Yeah, big time. So I think the last couple of years has been unprecedented, I suppose, in terms of that customer demand. We were fortunate enough to launch our new navigated product at the same time, which gave it a good kickstart. It's the change of our business, and I guess the approach is every unit that we send out into the field can collect data in a different way. So what we want to get to is that we're getting more information back into the system to be able to process better information. So the more people using the devices, the better the map can end up being as we're starting to collect so that anonymised information from that remote area. From a business application standpoint, I guess it goes back to that point of the better the data, the more useful it is for the business or the enterprise that needs it. That was a big thing we identified, and it was actually in some of the conversations with here around HEMA had allowed itself to become, I guess, almost reliant on the historical nature of our data rather than really going through and updating it. And with weather events, with what's happening in regional Australia at the moment in terms of so much change, we're very conscious that we've got to collect more information and better information to make sure we're populating the maps to be more meaningful and more useful. So that has been the big shift in terms of our behaviour set, is how do we collect more information from both our, I guess, verified sources, so our map patrols, our fleets, our fieldwork fleets out in the market, but also then being able to extract information from our consumers who might be out doing those tracks as well, so we can start to build another set of data that allows us to process it and have more up-to-date information for the people that use the maps.
Yeah, great. I wanted to ask you about an issue, to do with this mapping technology development that you've just spoken about, particularly updatable weather event alerts and connectivity issues. What's sort of happening that can particularly help in safety of remote workers?
Yeah, we've actually got a request in that field, which is I guess a lot of the systems that are being used are traditional and I guess historical in nature. So there might be a remote workforce in the mining sector. I can use it as an example, I won't name names, but they use 3 core applications for their remote field team. They've got a piece of paper, which is their work order. They've got a satellite communication device, be it sat phone or a SATCOM data provider, and then they're using our HEMA application for their mapping. So these 3 systems are totally disconnected in terms of the way that they operate, and they're not necessarily getting the best information back to the operator or back to the base. So what we're working on is how do you harmonise those things into a single application that allows them to build a work order. So there's effectively an itinerary that they can look at their planning, they know where they're going. The satellite communication can feed into that data set and provide location awareness of where that asset, be it human or physical, is. And then also through the navigation perspective of the map, be it our own map or a private map that they can use to identify the space they're in, they can then navigate their way through that area. So particularly in that exploration space where they're going to parts of Australia that don't have a road because they're in literally an exploration phase, they've still got to be able to have context about the topography, about the type of surface, all those sort of things. And sometimes in areas where that's challenged, becomes an OHS matter that they've got to actually work through and plan properly. So, and having that ability to communicate and for, I guess that process of being able to visualise where that person is, make sure that they're safe and all those things. And if you need to send them and update the instructions to them, you can do that remotely.
I think if I was going to add, I think that's one of the great points around our partnership is the heritage of both companies started off in an offline world. We've been doing this for 30 years plus together, right? And so connectivity wasn't really there. So we built our data sets and we built our applications that went to market offline first, which means when you are remote and there is no internet access and people that are using the HEMA HX Explorers are going remote, that's the whole point of buying one, they need to make sure that that data is readily available. So as they're navigating through the path, they can see up ahead on their screen what's going on. It really gives them a sense of security and sense of safety. And then when you do go back into an urban area or where there is connectivity, you can then connect back to the base station. So I think that's a really important issue, particularly where some more of the new players in this space have started with an online first model and won't go to offline. They'll remain as an online only model, whereas we offer the best of both.
Another practical example I can give is just, sorry, Caroline, there's some of the, I guess, reserve forces out in the Kimberley who are using, I guess, other navigation tools, and they're being directed to use that from a workforce perspective, and that those data providers don't have any information in that part of the world. So there is a really significant safety not obligation, but requirement in these areas to actually get better information, because often a consumer or a person working will get directed down a path that might add 1 to 6 hours additional to their trip because it doesn't understand some of the complexity of the roads in that area.
I'm glad that you've taken us into very remote sort of picture here, because I was interested that your data is increasingly including alerts for lands that are culturally significant for Aboriginal communities. Can you tell us more about that? And, you know, for example, like, do you think that you can help protect some of those areas?
Big time. So we've got a couple of MOUs in place. Kimberley Land Council, Northern Land Council. The HEMA business has been very aware of this as a matter or topic that we need to have as highly important in terms of the way that we collect data. There's a number of culturally sensitive sites out in those remote parts of Australia that the local or the Indigenous population are happy for people to go through and see, and it's an open asset. And then there's other things which are sacred sites which they want to make sure they protect. As part of our learning, engaging with those parties is often we would just take the information off the map. So there would be a track down to a certain site, and as soon as we took it off the map, the reality was when someone was going through that area, they would find a track and then try and explore it. So we actually changed the way that we structured that information on the map and actually put a road there but had no access, or private road or whatever it happened to be, to actually restrict access. And that was just a small example of how we work with them to try and manage that information in a smarter way in those remote areas. We've even got in a couple of the ranger programs who are using our base map to help them visualise their area. And again, we're working with them to try and get some of that information back into our core database, again, to improve the access for their rangers, but also where there's permits and all those things involved, making sure that we're getting that information back into the map.
Yeah, wow, that's so good to know. So interesting. Dan, I know that you're always looking to improve your services, and I was just wondering if you wanted to tell us what we might expect to see on the remote Australia mapping technology front that's coming from here in the next few years.
Absolutely. You're never stopping in this game. One of the big things that we're working on, we've launched, but we're, enhancing, is the ability to surface your private maps. I spoke a little bit about it earlier. Right now it's quite simple. It's quite geometry and some speed limits, right? So you can build yourself a map in a remote area, whether it's using, the tools that HEMA have collected, or, doing your own tools. But what we are servicing now is our map-making capabilities to provide a lot more context and a lot more information about what's happening on those rural areas, so that you could overlay any of your workforce information that's out in those areas. You might want to overlay any hazardous information that's out there, and then importantly connect it to both the offline database and the online database, so that when you're making an edit, because it's quite easy to build a map, but actually maintaining that map and keeping that map fresh is the challenge. So when you are making an edit, all the different applications that are using that specific map are updated in real time. And that's the exciting space that we're going down now. It's more of a tooling and a processing capability, but enables that functionality.
Oh, it sounds fantastic. I'm sure that's something business customers in particular have been crying out for, and you're here to help them. Thank you very much for your time today, Robert and Dan. It was great to learn more about the mapping technology that is part of our everyday lives these days.
Thanks, Caroline, for your time.
You've been listening to Fleet Auto News podcast. It was edited and produced by Isabella Fiorentino. Thank you again to our new sponsor, Sofico Services. It's great to have you on board. The original theme music for this podcast was created by Isabella Fiorentino. You can follow us on Spotify. Just search for Fleet Auto News. We're also on Instagram, Facebook and YouTube. Our website is fleetautonews.com, where you can get all our stories, videos and podcasts. Until next time, drive safely and take care.